Welcome to the Growth Hacking Culture podcast. We are going to be discussing about something that is quite dear to my heart, and it is about toxic cultures. Let's think about some data that we have seen all around the internet. Some data showing that, for instance, that companies that have psychological safety, one, they perform better. And there is another one that looks a little bit less funny that nearly 75% of employees have experienced a toxic workplace, with over half quitting a job because of that. The cost of this is staggering, not just in turnover and lost productivity, but in the serious impact on employee mental health and physical health. Our guest today is a leading voice in this space. Catherine Mattice is the founder of Civility Partners, an organizational development firm specializing in turning around toxic cultures. She's also the author of the book, Navigating a Toxic Workplace for Dummies. The basics, like what do we need in order to start? A practical guide for anyone, from an individual contributor to a CEO, looking to understand, address, and transform a negative work environment. Catherine, welcome to the show, and I hope that I have pronounced your name because it's a French name, Matisse, right?
It is, but it's actually a German name that was spelled Matthias. And when my ancestors came over to Ellis Island, they, didn't care what people said and they wrote down what they heard and it ended up being Matthias. That's how we say it. But nice to be here and thank you for having me.
Catherine, it is a pleasure to get to know you a little bit better because I remember that you have contributed to one of my blogs, and the article that you did for it was quite impressive in terms of the knowledge and the research that you have got. I guess mainly because of your book about toxic places, and this article, it was really good. And thank you very much for contributing to that article.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I've been researching and writing and publishing and speaking on this topic for almost 20 years now. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Let's see. Let's see. Catherine, let's define this term toxic workplace because
Yeah.
it gets like kind of thrown around a lot. And sometimes we just want to bitch about life and we just complain.
Yeah.
But sometimes it is not, and we feel it.
Mhm.
From your expertise, what are the key characteristics and kind of indicators that truly define a workplace that is toxic, beyond just a bad day or a difficult boss or a difficult coworker?
Yeah. Great question because we do throw that word around. A couple things. One, it is not just having a bad day or even having a little bit of ongoing conflict with somebody, right? It does. I think your gut check is maybe the first indicator that you're in a toxic environment. If you feel sick about having to drive to work or you dread having a meeting with somebody, those are physical indicators, that you're at least perceiving your environment as toxic. That word toxic or toxicity, it indicates a insidiousness, right? So we do, for example, you have a difficult boss or a frustrating coworker. Is that toxic? Maybe it depends on the behavior, right? So if you have a coworker that sort of always disagrees with people and they're a naysayer and that kind of annoys you, is that toxic? Probably not, unless it's keeping you from achieving your career goals or getting a project done, or it's harming your psychological safety. So it is insidious. And I like to say that toxic behavior, it's kind of exists on a spectrum, right? So incivility or rudeness or unprofessionalism, maybe that's not necessarily toxic. Maybe you don't go home and cry about it every day. But if that behavior is allowed to go on over time, it will evolve into something that is toxic because the more normal it becomes, the more tolerant of it you become, the thicker your skin gets. And so it evolves over time into something like bullying or harassment.
You have used a word that I remember back in the days. One of my bosses told me that he was picking on me because he wanted me to have a thicker skin.
Mm.
You made me think about that. But is it really? Do we become better by getting
No,
slapped around.
no,
That's the
there's
thing.
no research supporting that being picked on is going to make you more productive. So,
I also have the impression that um, maybe somehow the border between toxicity and I don't feel like coping with something is this sense of unfairness. When you specifically, for any reason whatsoever, you have been picked in frequency, in
hmm
constantly. And
hmm
that sense of unfairness is very human. We feel it. Like
yes.
when somebody else is not getting the same treatment as you,
hmm
and
Yep.
that makes you feel it even more.
I agree with you. Actually, I have a whole course on LinkedIn Learning about how fairness as a manager because that perception is so important, and it's not about having it's not about having to be fair all the time, where but it is about setting things up so that your employees perceive you as being fair, if that makes sense. I'm not saying manipulate it, but
Yeah.
that you may not be able to treat everybody exactly the same, but helping employees understand why you made certain decisions or why certain things are happening, that all contributes to feeling like it's fair.
Hmm.
And that's important.
I have a case, a real case scenario, and I always take examples
Yeah,
from
let's
my
do it.
past life. Um, is it like toxicity if you feel that you are not a match with the culture? What does it mean? Is like the rest of the people are being treated the same way. They're focused on performance, being the best. There is a little bit of competitiveness, but you feel like you are not a match, and you
Mm-hmm.
feel always alone because you are different. You don't think that this is you, this is your values, this is the person that you were dreaming of back when you were 14, 15, and you were having big dreams about changing the world, and suddenly
Yeah,
you are doing commercial, something that you don't know what it is, but you are doing PowerPoints constantly, and you feel like, what? That wasn't me. That is not me.
right.
But you feel it, you feel the pain, but
Mm-hmm.
is it really toxicity?
Again, I think the answer is always it depends. Is it that you feel kind of like an outcast or alone because the organization is setting you up to feel that way? Or is it that, and if so, then I would say maybe that is toxicity. If it's more that you're coming to work feeling like, I don't agree with the values here. I don't kind of approve of the way people behave, but that's your own choice that that's how you're feeling. I would say maybe that's not toxic. I will, it's interesting you're bringing this up because we literally just yesterday had a client where it's a small little work site of 10 people in a much larger organization, and so they have some conflict. And there's one person in particular who filed a discrimination complaint and a harassment complaint against the manager there. So she's a woman, he's a
Mm.
man, it's mostly men. There were no findings when they did the formal investigation. And so they asked us to help get people back to work and collaborating, which is a task we hear of a lot, that there's no findings. So they got to work together now.
Mm.
And after interviewing everyone, it became clear that the one who had complained is fairly toxic all on her own because she really uses victimhood as a bullying tactic in a way. So everything is woe is me. You're not paying attention to me. I don't like the way you talk to me. And so I'm not trying to victim shame. Certainly we're not in the business of just like you need to fire someone who complains. That's not what I'm saying. But in this particular case, nobody else really agreed with her that what they have had observed was discrimination or harassment. And so she was really isolating herself. And so we made the recommendation to maybe help her coach her way out and go. So she doesn't fit in, is what it boils down to. I think that's a good
Mm.
example of it depends. On the flip side, if she's being harassed and discriminated against, of course we're going to get after the employer. You need to fix this. This can't be happening. But through the interviews, it became clear that she was toxic by being a victim all the time.
Indeed, it can happen. It's just that sometimes we cannot be 100% sure because we are
Correct.
humans. We have our biases. We see a guy with a tattoo and then we say, yeah, but maybe he's a little bit like different. We see a little bit someone who is, I don't know, singing some pop music and we associate it with, I don't know, with whatever we
Yeah.
want. And and then we take these positions that have been engraved by the society, this
Hmm.
equal to that,
Hmm.
and then we judge badly. And
Yeah.
it can happen at work. It happens sometimes in the justice departments of the
Hmm.
world. Uh,
Hmm.
that's the problem with toxicity. How to get to know to the deep, unless there is a bunch of people who have the courage to
Right.
complain, and if it
Right.
is just one who feels it before or who has the courage to do it,
Yeah.
we're not always sure.
Well, that's why we do surveys, right? So I'm happy to say we do not operate in facts. We don't do investigations after a complaint's been filed for harassment. We're not there to determine, what actually happened on this day at this time. We are there to understand perception. So we do what we call a climate assessment, and it looks at a variety of measurements: engagement, job satisfaction, inclusivity and psychological safety, communication and relationships. And then we have this quantitative data where we can say, the perception of 40% of your work environment, according to this question, doesn't trust their leadership, or 70% of people say they're not getting great feedback from their manager. And so is that a fact? I don't know. But if 70% of people are saying they disagree with this statement that they get enough feedback, then that's their perception. And I think we could all agree that, you get a group of people with the same perception that it's reality.
Catherine, before we started the discussion, this recording, I mentioned to you, people wants to know, to have some meaty details about
Mhm.
stuff like you have mentioned surveys. I do
Yeah.
believe that surveys are a perfect tool to be objective,
Mm-hmm.
but one survey is not equal to another survey. I have seen poll surveys that are a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Sorry for the word, but that
Sure.
they allow you to construct any type of storyline behind the culture so
Mm-hmm.
that management can hide, oh yeah, but this can mean this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it
Yep.
becomes like, as an employee, you feel like even worse.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we do see a lot of clients not doing surveys very well, or they do a survey, but they don't do any action as a result of the survey. Or something we see a lot these days is engagement surveys. They're all the rage right now. But an engagement survey is measuring levels of engagement or enthusiasm for the workplace. You can be enthusiastic because you like your boss and you like your project and you like your team, but also observe discrimination or harassment simultaneously. Or you can have a toxic boss, but still be enthusiastic about your own team and your own work, right? Or that you get to go out and see clients. So that's a mistake. Don't mistake an engagement survey as a measurement of culture. And so I think there's a lot of HR people out there doing workforce surveys without their social scientist hat on. If you're going to do a survey, you have to ask, like, what's the research question? What am I trying to solve with this survey? Not just do a survey because that's what people say you should be doing. That's the wrong way to go about it.
I love the point that you took about engagement surveys. This is quite valid, and you're totally right. I'm totally with you. Now, talking about managers, sometimes they are victims, sometimes they are the reason.
Yes.
What I wanted to know is what have you observed in terms of the biggest mistakes that they do that contributes to a toxic environment? That even if they are not the one doing the harm, they are
Mm-hmm.
the one closing their eyes.
Yep.
What have you
Well,
observed?
well, that's the biggest mistake, is closing their eyes. So what we see a lot is managers are not told that it's expected of them to not only manage the operations and the tasks, that they're all supposed to they're supposed to also be managing the people, right? In fact, that's more important to manage the people. So what happens is you have a team, let's say, for example, that has some gossiping going on. Maybe there's some inappropriate joking and sarcasm at someone's expense, and these more kind of subtle behaviors. Managers need to step in and address those behaviors, because those are the behaviors that evolve into something like harassment. So, I hear stories where people complain to HR, for example. I'm sort of in conflict with this person. We're not getting along. And then they're told, well, you're adults, go figure it out. You got this. You don't need me for this. And that, again, that's a mistake. So leaders need to make it very clear to managers, your job is to manage people and the relationships among those people first, and then manage the other stuff. And I love that saying, act like an adult. I'm like, in what world do adults act well? I mean, we have war and conflict and therapists and attorneys, because adults don't act very well at all. So that, it just kind of cracks me up. So that's the biggest mistake, is not paying attention to those behaviors, because they're not unlawful. Nobody wants to micromanage, in civility, but so employers need to set expectations about the right behavior and hold people accountable to that right behavior.
But very often, and it's still now that I have left my corporate life, people were rated and are still rated based on the performance in terms of what the task that they have accomplished. And
right.
The people side either has a very low weight on the total bonuses that I will get at the year. So, and if you are a rational person, why would you invest time if it is not rewarded? It's the opposite. It can harm you, because there will be somebody who is a smart ass who will come to you and will tell you that will not pay. You will see.
Right. You're right. Why would they do it if they're not rewarded for it? Perfect sense. So that's, again, employers need to make it clear that that's the expectation. We do a lot with clients around turning their company core values into core competencies, so that, an accountant has to be competent in math and whatever accounting software they're using, and understand taxes a little bit. Those are all competencies your CFO has to have, for example. But then what about those people skills? So if the company's core value is, inclusivity or respect or customer service, any of these typical core values, you can turn those into competencies, and you could say, hey, CFO and everybody, you have to be competent in your own job. And you also have to be competent in being respectful and inclusive and all of the things. And so then you can start, measuring people on their ability to engage in those core values. And that's the way to do it. So that's a lot of what we do, is taking culture, which, as you know, can feel very abstract for a lot of people, unless it's what you do for a living, and operationalizing it, right? And helping them see culture can be just like your operations procedures. They can function together. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
And that is beautiful, because it has a direct impact on the processes of business. Because very often they want to, certain companies want to change culture by using the magic tool called training. Let's train people.
Yeah.
What the hell? I find it quite 70s, in fact, when we didn't know shit about human psychology or organizational psychology. That's a biggie, I would say. In certain cases, it's difficult for the individual, the employee, to navigate and try to protect himself. And of course, they need to have some coping mechanism, or some resilience building strategies to cope with toxicity, because they might not feel that it's the right moment to quit the jobs. Because your book, in fact, is about the choices. It's about, so what can I do if I decide this? But it's about the different choices that you have when you are in front of toxicity. So what would you recommend to this person? I'm not ready yet to quit my job, for either a real reason or an imaginary reason that happens to most of us in life?
Yeah, yeah. I like that you kind of separated that out. So first off is the narrative around a successful complaint in an organization is wrong. So when you read the academic research around being bullied, for example, there isn't a lot of research that says, hey, a bunch of people reported it to HR swooped in and solved it, and that person was let go. And, and that's success. There aren't a lot of stories like that. And so if you read the academic research, there's no examples of successfully navigating a toxic work environment. I would say I push back on that and say success doesn't have to mean that you filed a complaint and everything went your way. Success means that you've either figured out how to cope with this bad behavior, or that you've decided that you're not the loser just because you quit. So going back to your imaginary, comment there, like that there's an imaginary reason. That imaginary reason is a lot of times people feel like if I quit, then that person, that toxic person, or this toxic company wins, and I'm the loser, right? I'm walking away with my tail between my legs. So let's not think about it that way. So that's step one. Recognize that leaving is actually winning, because you're not, how is staying in a toxic work environment winning? It's not. So that's step one. Step two is I think you can assess whether or not the organization cares about this. So if you look around and you see, for example, that the company does do surveys, and then there's actions after the surveys to make things better, and that HR has a good relationship with the leadership team so that they're a good advisor, and you can see that there's training being offered in your organization around, behavior and interpersonal skills and things, then that's an indicator to you that you're in an environment where the organization cares, and they'll probably try to help you, right? Versus if they're not doing any of those things and HR doesn't report to the leadership team and there isn't training like that, that's an indicator that your organization's probably not going to help you if you file a complaint. So that's kind of step two, is really understand the lay of the land. My book has a whole chapter on kind of a checklist of all of these things to be thinking about. And then, resilient people, what makes them resilient is they're good at thinking through a plan and executing that plan and being flexible with getting through the plan, and that they see this as a challenge to be overcome, not something that will take them out. So that's the other piece, is you do have to think of a plan. So even if you're thinking, I can't quit tomorrow, I'm about to buy a house, or, we've got things going on that keeps me from quitting, fine. But figure out a plan and then execute it. And that could be a 6-month plan or a 2-year plan. And the whole reason that makes you resilient is it gives you control over something that doesn't feel that you have control over, right? So you can't control that person, and you can't control how the organization responds to your complaints, but you can control your exit plan. So the last thing I'll say is, a lot of times in terms of that, like, should I quit? My answer is, try to exhaust every opportunity to make it better. And if that doesn't help, then yes, exit. You can leave knowing that you did everything you could to make it better and you weren't successful. And so you've got to go and be a winner somewhere else,
You have used the word control. And I think this is one of the key indicators when things are not going right, is that when you feel that your life is managed by somebody else,
Yeah.
either your boss, your company, even friends, but it doesn't matter. But it is about losing the sense of control. So sometimes we associate burnout with overworking. It's bullshit. Sometimes it is not overworking. When we are entrepreneur, we work sometimes much more, but we
Yeah.
don't feel that tired because we are doing something that we
We're
enjoy.
energized.
We
Yeah.
are energized, exactly. We wake up I do, at 5 o'clock in the morning because I'm old, to work with joy. But I didn't feel the same when I was back in my corporate life. So
Yep.
it is not about the amount of the quantity of hours, is the context, is how much
Right.
it depends on me. I have decided to be here at 7:30 p.m. in front of the computer because I love it.
Right.
Nothing else.
Right.
Exactly. So this sense of control is something that is quite unique to the definition of toxicity, how much we feel toxicity. There is another element that while you were talking that you made me think is that sometimes it is when we are assessing imaginary reasons. Like we say, oh, it's because of the money, it is because it's not all bad. Like
Mm-hmm.
I know companies, for instance, who have excellent trainings, the development is amazing, you can travel all over the world, but if you are not part of the gang, you are
Yeah.
nothing. You're not existent. You
Right.
are a little piece of something in the that they will forget, and your career will be over. So it doesn't mean that when you are in a toxic environment that you are everything is bad. There will
Right.
be, but it is up to you to decide. Do I want these amazing trainings and the capabilities to be living in some fancy places, or
It's true.
do I want control of my life?
Yep. Yep. In my book, I have a whole list of kind of examples of toxic versus not. And I do say right at the top of that list, you probably see things from both sides. You're not all toxic or all good. There's going to be, it's not all good all the time. But yeah, so you get to decide how much you're willing to tolerate. And that's part of that control. I'm here because I choose to be, and I choose to deal with that toxic person because I like everything else about working here, then great. You then go and do that. But if you're feeling, that's what I was saying earlier, if you're feeling burned out, or every day when you get up to go to work, your gut is telling you, please don't go, you can't sleep at night, then that's a different place that you're in.
So we were talking about choices in your book.
Mm-hmm.
So the ultimate choice or decision is to leave that toxic environment.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is the most effective way for someone to plan and execute a departure without burning bridges or damaging your own reputation or being ready? I mean, it's not easy. Like even when you go from employee to an entrepreneur, it's not
Yeah.
easy. You suffer.
No, it's
It's
not. It's
painful.
not. Well, so a couple of things I would, everybody, I think it's still true today. We've always said, your resume looks better if you're currently working when you're looking for a job. So you don't want to quit and then, have a big gap before you get another job. So everybody expects that you'll be looking for a job while you're already employed. So that's what you should do. I suggest looking at culture, looking at Glassdoor reviews for companies you're interested in. I suggest, it's great that it's easier to leave now because we're not limited to our geography. So you can work remotely and find plenty of other employers, not even in your community. And I would also spend some time, and this is also in my book, sort of thinking through what is it that you're really looking for. So what is it that's causing you to leave that place? And then you can be asking questions about it in your interviews, so you could ask questions like, what's the culture like? Do core values, are they core competencies too? A great question is in your interviews to ask, who are the corporate heroes, and then you can start to, is it the people who work a million hours, or is it the people who are kind, and you'll get some sense through that question, who are the company heroes. So having a clear list of questions to ask that help you ensure you're moving into a better work environment, and being prepared with your answer as to why you're leaving the environment you're in, right? And I think it's perfectly okay, some may disagree, to say something like, I'd like to exit that company because, or exit my current employer because I find the manager to be difficult to work with. And here are the steps I've taken to try to resolve it on my own. And I haven't been successful in doing that. So I've decided to exit. And I think it's okay to say something like that. And then, of course, in your exit interview with the company you're leaving, you're certainly not going to badmouth everything. But I also encourage you to talk to them about it and say, hey, I've made a few complaints to you about this individual or this environment I'm in, and I haven't seen any movement, and that's why I'm exiting, so you can be honest without burning bridges.
Hmm. I, I have the impression that the message that you're passing is that leaving a company or is not a feeling. It's not, I feel bad or I don't feel belonging to this place. It's more a rational decision.
Yes.
And you have to try to move away. Of course, it's going to affect us. So we're going to be feel sad and all the stuff. But there
Yeah.
are moments that we need to create uh, a space for digging out the objectivity, digging out the self-awareness, because you said you need to know what really you don't like in that, or what are you looking for.
Yep.
So that means you have to investigate around you. A
Hmm.
lot of the efforts has to do with you, so
Hmm.
that you end up in the right place.
Yeah. Yeah. And that it's interesting because I hear that a lot. And, too, if when you speak to HR, if you're filing a complaint, I always say, don't go there and cry and ask for their help. As emotional as it is, HR can't help you when your positioning is around your own emotions. HR can better help you if you're talking about the damage you've seen. You saw that toxic person yell at a client, you're aware that three other people left because of that person, so you making a business case is what you need to be focused on. And same for if you're going to leave, kind of make a business case for yourself as to why you're leaving and where you're going and what you need, and being clear on your boundaries. And so yeah, as emotional as this all is, you've got to find a way to be rational about it. And you know what? I just want to add one other thing. I read an article with someone who's now a friend, because I reached out to her when I saw the article because she mentioned my first book, Back Off. And she talked about in her article that there's a lot of advice out there similar to my new book. It's a lot of very logical advice. And her article was all about how this behavior is illogical. Being bullied is illogical. It's emotional. And her point was sort of that this logical advice isn't helpful because it is so emotional. And so I ended up writing her an email, and I was like, "What, you mentioned my book among some of the other things you mentioned in your article, and I just wanted to talk with you about it." And I said, domestic violence is obviously also very emotional, but the reality is someone at the receiving end of that violence has to logically exit. And so it does have to be logical. They have to figure out how to logically make an exit without being harmed, and where they're going to go and how they're going to survive that exit, just like so it doesn't matter how emotional things are. In the end, you have to have a logistic plan.
Mm. And that doesn't mean go and don't have emotions, have
Exactly.
them, but create the space so that you can take choices that are meaningful for you. It's
Yep.
just about the little space that you say, okay, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling hurt.
Yeah.
And maybe you can say he's an asshole. Okay, the good,
Yeah.
acknowledge, but create
Yeah.
the space just to plan it objectively.
Correct. Yeah.
There is a lot of misunderstanding. I'm not going to open the door to mindfulness or anything like that, but there is a lot of misunderstanding about the link between being able to acknowledge emotions and
Mm-hmm.
being able to create choices for us. And
Mm-hmm.
that is so difficult sometimes to, so that the message goes out there and says, we just need that little moment where we can rationalize the shit. And then let's
Yeah.
become the Latino that I
Yeah,
am.
be emotional, cry. I'm certainly not saying don't be emotional. In fact, probably talking with the therapist is going to be important for you too if you're in a toxic environment to
Indeed.
In fact, I go to therapy and she tells me more than half of her clients, that's what they talk about is work, and the toxicity at work. And she's helping people figure out their plan to exit or what they need to be doing and not doing. And yeah, it's a sad state that we have. I always say I shouldn't even have a job. Why do I even have to write this book? People should be kind and leaders should care, but that's not the reality.
That's not the reality. But this time, I personally don't blame companies. I blame our human nature.
Mhm.
We are capable of creating monsters or imaginary friends or images of the world that destroy everything, that we are completely biased. We see someone who doesn't think the same as me, enemy.
Right.
And
Right.
so it's the human nature, but I think it's going to take more time than I thought about when I was younger about how to make a real evolution for uh, in human nature so that we tame a little bit our small demons that are inside of our head. But when we are aware that we have these small demons inside of us, we feel a little bit better. We know that we can be in both sides. We are capable of anything, the worst and the best.
Yeah.
Oops. um, in your book, let's go back to your book because we went a little bit too much in the tangent. In your
I
book,
love it though.
you mentioned a couple of myths
Mhm.
about toxic workplace places. Uh, I think you have more than one chapter, or is it a
Yeah,
chapter that
there's
has a
three.
lot
Yeah.
of
I
things?
think there's two or three myth chapters. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about this myth that people think about what is a toxic workplace?
Yes. Yeah. Well, one of the big myths I am talking about a lot is that everybody says culture comes from the top. And I disagree with that statement. And because when I go in and do training in organizations, sometimes I get this sense of helplessness coming through from, the attendees of like, well, thanks for this, but I can't do anything until the leader does X, Y, and Z. And so there again, you're that helplessness. You've got to, if you're going to be resilient, you've got to have a plan. It's not up to the leader. Well, it is up to the leader to create a good environment, but culture doesn't come from the top. Culture comes from the people you work with, especially in large organizations, right? If I work for AT&T, multi bazillion dollar global organization, culture's not coming from the top. I don't know the CEO, I never interact with them. Culture is coming from the interactions that I have every day with the people I work with. And so you can influence culture no matter your level. I'm curious to hear your reaction because you're looking at me like, I don't know if I agree with that. So I could say that certainly leaders can put resources towards the kind of culture they want, and they can make a statement that they desire a certain kind of a culture. But it really is, you really can influence the people around you, and that's the big message that I want to share with that myth, that sure, it can come from the top, but that's not really the reality. So that's a one myth.
Regarding that point, I want to believe that there might be certain level of truth. Uh, but then I'm thinking about our human nature. So in order to survive, we have to mime the behaviors that the powerful have. So
Mm-hmm.
if we see the powerful doing something and still being powerful, we're going to do it naturally, even if it is not written, even if for instance, yes, we don't have directly access to the CEO all the time, especially when we are young, but there is like the ripple effect that happens that the first line of senior management team is going to be behaving aligned, very closely aligned to the behaviors of the CEO, and so on. It passes on. These, for instance, small things like the culture of you need to be available at 9 p.m. or Saturday.
Right.
Can we go
Right.
to the presentation? That didn't come from the employees. The normal employees wanted to be at home taking care of the
Right.
children. It came
Right.
from somebody on the top. So I have the impression that it might not be the one super important element, but it might be the element that can destroy the efforts of the masses.
Yes, and this is great. I love this. Yes, and so could an employee. So you could have a CEO who encourages work-life balance, doesn't expect you to, work all those hours and all of this, but you have one employee that's manipulative and, aggressive or humiliates people. That one employee, they don't have to be at the top, but if they're a good producer,
Mm.
their behavior is more likely to be overlooked and kind of like, well, they get results, so we don't care about that. So yes, it's still the leader saying, I approve of this behavior, but it's the individual. The other pushback I'll give is, what if you and I work together on a team of 10 people, let's say, and we have a toxic boss who expects us to respond to emails at 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
What if everybody on our team didn't? What if we all agree we're not going to respond to emails after 6 p.m. and the boss is on his own? Is the boss going to fire all of us for not performing?
Mm.
No.
No, no, you're
Yep.
right.
So there are power in numbers. And you see it all the time in history. Leaders rule and rule and rule. And then
Mm.
eventually people decide we don't want to be ruled that way anymore. So I'm not saying you should stand up and walk out, but I think that's the key to getting through this as well. Kind of back to your question that you asked earlier, there are power in numbers. And if your whole team decides we're just not going to respond to those emails after 6 p.m., then you've taken control.
I do believe in that power numbers, but I also know that it's damn hard to have the courage to stand to
It
power
sure
because
is.
we always feel that we're going to lose something.
It sure is. But boundaries are the key to life.
Yeah, that's, that's true. One last question, and I want to be provocative here.
Okay.
Can we really speak up to human resources in all corporations, or is it another myth? Is
Yeah.
it, yeah, we can say whatever. It's so open, but I wanted to have your opinion.
This is a great question. So here's the answer. According to all of the academic research from all around the world, the answer is no. You should never talk to HR. The research is very clear that they make it worse. In my own experience, however, doing what I do, I'm selling to HR. That's who my sales calls are with initially. And then, of course, we want them to bring in the decision maker. But that's who we partner with when we're doing our work. What I see, my own personal experience, is the narrative is that HR has been trying to talk the leadership into addressing this problem for a long time. And they care very much about the culture and solving it. But the leaders have been saying no. And because, so they can't fix it because leaders haven't given them the permission or the resources to do so. Then they come to us when some big catalyst happened, like a big strike or some important other highly valued person exits, or there's a myriad of reasons, but that we notice there's always this catalyst where the leader finally says, okay, HR, you have my permission to solve it. And so my experience is just very different and sure, there are plenty of not great HR professionals out there, but the ones I talk to care very much and have been trying to help, but they haven't been able to.
Mm. So basically, it's not the position, it's the person. We have to know the person because within all this HR is not one single person, it's not one single characteristic. There are people that do care, cannot do shit, care, can have some leverage, and care and would lose her job or his job for you.
Yep. And I'll share a story. I was talking to an HR person recently. They'd had a toxic person on the team for a long time. This was a board of directors for or it was the executive team for a nonprofit organization. And the HR person on that team, she was telling us that, this other toxic person had been there for a long time. And it finally took us coming in to really recommend, you got to let that person go. They're toxic. We don't even want to help you coach them. You just got to let them go. And they took our advice. And HR is telling us, in a way, it really hurt her because she had been telling the CEO to solve this problem for a long time. And she had mentioned that even at one point, she said to the CEO, you trust me on everything else. Why don't you trust me on this advice I'm giving you around letting this person go? And it really took a toll on her. And so that's what I see. I don't see these nasty HR people who don't care that everybody else is talking about.
Catherine, I love the discussion that we have got.
Me
You
too.
gave me a little bit of food for thought. Tonight, I'm going to think about what you said about the top. Uh, and I'm obsessive, so I'm telling you the
Okay,
truth.
you got to email me or call me and let me know what you came up with.
Catherine, how people can best talk to you?
Yeah.
Questions. I am pretty sure that this has sparked a lot of curiosity. How can they
Yeah.
reach you, Catherine?
Yep. So my website is civilitypartners.com. So you can go there. You can just Google my name, Catherine Mattice. I'm all over the place. Certainly, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love for you to connect or follow me. We send out a weekly e-newsletter that is very advice driven. We're not going to try to sell you things. It's not fluffy. It's very we try to be really tangible in what we're offering. So I would encourage anybody to sign up for the e-newsletter, and you can do that by just going to the website and signing up, or again, reach out to me on LinkedIn.
That's good. So I'm going to be putting below this episode your LinkedIn profile, the link to the newsletter, because I think that newsletters have become like, if I don't like the topics, then I ditch it.
Just
But
unsubscribe
you
if
have
you
a
don't like
choice.
it, but give it a try.
And then I need to put the link for your book
My
because I
book,
think that
yes.
navigating a toxic workplace is the way I also love the fact that this for dummies, the structure, I'm pretty sure that you got like a template to follow. I'm not sure,
Yes.
but I love the structure. I have learned so many things out of them. Really.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will put the
It's a
link to that.
great, it's kind of meant to be like an encyclopedia. It's not meant to be read from cover to cover. You can find the topics that are of interest to you. And I did try to make it very simple, and I loved writing it. It's my whole life story in here. It's my memoir.
That that's good. And on top, usually they are not boring. It's not like these
Right.
academical people from university who will tell you model frameworks. It goes straight to action.
Yep. Yep. Well, thank you. Yes. So please buy it. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Thank you very much, Catherine. It was really lovely to spend time with you. See you
Same.
soon.
Thank you. Thank you.